The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 2nd chapter. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'" Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they sent out. And there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. The Gospel of the Lord. Epiphany, in a way, is very familiar. Even those unfamiliar with the story or the name of this holy day, there's something about the Magi, or the images of the kings, the wise men, arriving to see baby Jesus that is kind of leaked into the secular world. Whether it's a lawn nativity decoration or the carol we just sang, "We Three Kings," the story feels sort of familiar, even if it's not. And for those of us who have been in the church a while, Epiphany brings so many telltale signs with it. The Christmas decorations are taken down, the nave is degreened, and we enter this nebulous time between Christmas and Lent. The familiarity within the church, likewise, can make Epiphany seem normal, which kind of negates the idea of an epiphany in its entirety. See, the literal meaning of epiphany is not about a predicted or expected familiarity. It's a feeling of eureka, aha, a revelation, a realization. In this specific case, our epiphany, our eureka, is about the birth of Jesus, God incarnate being revealed and recognized by the world. Again, perhaps not too surprising to us, given that 12 days ago we were celebrating Christmas, the birth of Christ, but even still, this epiphany truly makes waves. And there are many parts, many epiphanies to explore in this story from Matthew. The writer of Matthew gives us this epiphany account after a long genealogy at the beginning of Matthew, and then a short angelic dream sequence with Joseph. We don't have pastoral imagery, censuses, magnificats, or even angelic choruses. Instead, we get our gospel tonight. A series of revelations to a few different sets of people, to the Magi, to Herod, and to Mary. The first epiphany that we shall ponder is the one given to the Magi from the east. These wise, learned mystics those who have worked to find understanding in the stars were shown something in the night sky. Now, oftentimes, stars were linked to births of important individuals like royalty or great heroes. And it is in this way that God navigated them to the lands of Judea. Now, this is the big one. This is the reason we celebrate Epiphany. It's not simply that people are aware of Jesus' presence. It's that it's people outside of Judah. People who had no knowledge of the Torah, who in fact studied an entirely different field, believed an entirely different belief system. They are the ones who God led from far distant lands to bear witness to the birth of the Messiah. And this is incredibly important. It's always interesting whenever the Bible mentions a member of the Gentiles who is either receiving or understands God's messages. And these magi were directly guided by a moving star, reminiscent of the pillars of fire and clouds guiding the Israelites. It led them to Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. And what's more, after they pay Jesus homage, they receive a dream where God warns them away from Herod, and they listen. They listen to the signs of God. Goodness me, it seems that some of the biblical heroes couldn't even do that much. In this story, the Magi are stand-ins for the entirety of the Gentiles. They represent the idea that Gentiles recognize God incarnate as Jesus, that Gentiles are included in God's promises. We are included in God's promises. It is a stunning revelation, but it is not the only epiphany we will look at tonight. Because while the epiphany of the Magi is rather a joyous epiphany, they aren't the only ones to learn about Jesus' birth. No, we also have Herod, the Judean king, who was supported by Rome. When Herod learned of what these magi were seeking, Matthew does not describe joy and jubilation at the realization that these magi are searching for the king of the Jews. The long-hoped-for Messiah is not welcome news in the halls of Herod. This is setting up Matthew's tradition of those in the upper echelons of Jewish law and priesthood just not getting Jesus' purpose. Herod and all Jerusalem with him was supposed to represent this elite and the city that had allied with Rome and that they seek Jesus' demise. Matthew wants us to see the hypocrisy of Herod, that he is the supposed king, but does not truly care for his people. Herod's reaction to the birth of this Messiah was filled with duplicity and evil intent. The Epiphany, the revelation of the Messiah to Herod through the Magi, was less of a good news, but more of a warning and a challenge. While it's not necessarily in Matthew, we have to remember the words of the Magnificat. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. While these specific words may never have reached Herod's ears, the promise within them that the rich and powerful will be overturned by God terrifies Herod. He sees Jesus as a threat, even as an infant. Herod's epiphany is that his rule is threatened. It is not the conquering Messiah that will uplift and sustain his efforts. No, it is a Messiah who brings redemption and forgiveness and demands righteousness from those meant to uphold God's commands. Then, in a parallel to Herod, there is an epiphany happening to Mary. I have to imagine that it is likewise parallel to the Annunciation. Mary is not mentioned much in Matthew's birth narrative, but here she is the one who receives the Magi when they pay homage to Jesus, as she is holding him. And while Mary knew that Jesus was God's son, there must have been some kind of realization that occurred at that moment. When wizened scholars from another land come and present your newborn with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, that's got to catch you off guard just a little bit. In a way, the Epiphany for Mary is very similar to Herod's. She is realizing who her little Jesus truly is. In the verses following ours tonight, Joseph receives a warning from God in a dream that Herod is looking for them. Again, it is realizing that this promised Son of God is exactly what the Magnificat, what she proclaimed earlier, is fulfilling. All the while, there is this added sense of familiarity with Mary. With the Magi and Herod, there is a distance. For Mary, this revelation is about the child that she carried in her womb, a child that is so near as to be family. And this family is the one who is causing all this ruckus. It is this nearness, the understanding of Jesus not as some far-off king, but as an immediate incarnate child that we get to see from Mary's view. Lastly, there is a final epiphany, sort of. It's our epiphany, which seems a bit funny. As I said before, we already know that Jesus has been born. We celebrated it 12 days ago, and we're celebrating it today. We will celebrate it again. We already know that Jesus has entered our world and entered our lives by the gift and grace of God. We've seen Jesus as this Messiah, as the revelation to the Magi and to Herod and to Mary. But what this epiphany does, this revelation that gives this to us, this yearly evaluation of what it means, it is through this that we get to see God in our world and in our lives. We get to see Jesus enter our lives again and again as the light to the whole world, as a challenge to the oppressors of this world, and as an intimate blessing in our lives, to the Magi, to Herod, to Mary, to us. It may seem like a simple thing, but it is a beautifully simple thing that we are blessed to realize and experience over and over again. Christ has come incarnate, the light of the world, and we give thanks for such a gift. Amen.